Hello.
Welcome everyone to our discussion today on tips to manage your global trademark portfolio during these volatile times. For those of you who are not familiar with Novagraaf, we are a hybrid global IP law firm and organization offering IP legal services, administrative services, as well as software and tools. We've been around for 130 years with 18 offices around the world. We're the leading trademark representative in Europe and the third largest provider of patent annuities worldwide. And we offer an extensive suite of tools and services for management of trademarks, which you'll hear more about today. Please submit your questions during the session, and we will address them at the end. We will answer as many as possible, but if we fail to answer them during the session, we will send answers via email later. We, like many of you, are working from home at this time, so please be patient with us in case you hear some background noises from our new work colleagues. I'm Sharon Meyer, Senior Advisor with Novagraaf, based in Chicago, and I'll be your moderator for today's discussion. Joining me are experts across trademark practice, each with a unique perspective. So our panelists for today, we have Alistair Rollins, Senior Trademark Attorney. Senior Trademark Attorney with Novagraaf, based in the UK. Toon Simmons, Managing Director for IP Services at Novagraaf, based in the Netherlands. And Sophia Nadgurney, Associate Counsel, Trademarks and Domains, Warner Music Group, based in New York. And finally, Michelle Ciatola, Partner and Vice Chair of the Trademark and Copyright Group, Cantor Colburn, based in Hartford. It's clear that today's environment is not business as usual. If you take a look at the first quarter earnings season, this potential recession looks to be impactful. We are already starting to see trends in the last few months. Trademark filings are down, almost 20% in the US alone. Company IP leaders are being asked to cut the budget or at least be prepared as their company rethinks their strategy for the future. All clear indications that companies are not optimistic about the future. Since the trademark portfolio can be a big part of the budget, it is important to have a clear strategy to manage. This is what we're going to talk about today. There are many aspects to the budget, and the first question is where to start. Well, it depends on whether you are in development of your portfolio. You might be early on in development or going through a change in strategy or launching new brands, and your focus would be on new filings or counsel management. Or you might have a more developed portfolio and your focus might be on renewals. You might have a very inefficient process and your focus might be on technology or consolidation. You might focus on enforcement, finding ways to utilize technology to cut costs and continue to manage your brands. We're going to walk through these topics and our experts are going to share their tips and best practices. Let's start with Sophia. She's going to cover new filings.
Good morning, everyone. In light of everything that's going on, but even just regularly when it comes to advising business on new trademark filings, I tend to take a cost-conscious approach. So on that end, wherever possible, we try to recycle or expand existing marks instead. We have a large portfolio of really historic, really great marks. So where possible, if we can maybe use that as the house mark, or if we have, let's say, particular class coverage already, but we want to expand it to a new good or service, we could at least base it off of that instead of going and filing an entirely new filing portfolio. In line with that, where possible, we try to beef up coverage by consolidating with community marks, and even more so and better, where possible, we try to use seniority claims in the EU to maintain earlier dates. The only caveat I say about consolidating with EU marks is that EU has pretty strict use requirements. So if there's particular marks that you're not, super comfortable about the extent of use that you've had in particular territories, I'd be really strategic about which ones you drop and which ones you consolidate. The other thing that I try to push, especially in times like this where you're really cost conscious, is only going ahead and filing new marks that are strong and that are unlikely to to have rejections and oppositions or obstacles. You know, if there's a chance that it's going to be descriptive, or if you've done a preliminary search and you know that there's a similar mark, although a different industry, but that some registrations they have that are very broadly covered that might be cited against you. You know, in those instances, I try to push back. The other thing that we tend to do is when first filing, I'll focus on first to file jurisdictions to solidify rights there, and then kind of wait on first to use jurisdictions if we've already established those rights. The only caveat, again, being in the US, is you have that advantage with the 1B intent to use filing, which gives you the date of filing as the date of first use. But where, you know, where that doesn't apply, try to be strategic between your first to file versus first to use jurisdictions, because you could really use those to your advantage in a cost savings of short term versus long term. And the other really good conversation that I have with business is really, you know, what is their goal? Not all marks are created equal, not all projects, not all initiatives, not all goods and services are created equal. So, you know, in some instances, they really just care about risk of use. Like they don't intend on enforcing it. They may not really intend on using it for a particularly long amount of time, or maybe this is an experimental, you know, project. So if it's really a matter of we just want to use it, we're not really thinking about, you know, enforcement. That's one you know, that's one consideration, as opposed to this is a really big initiative and this is something that they know that, you know, is on the top line and really on the forefront of a lot of the company. Also, another kind of caveat there is a lot of times if whatever new mark they're filing is going to be in conjunction or used with an existing well-known house mark, that's another instance where you could maybe hold off a little bit, or you may not need as extensive of coverage if you're going to be depending on the house mark in that instance. And then lastly, when it comes to new filings, even when trying to control outside counsel costs for searches, what I've noticed has really helped us is that I'll really narrowly scope my outside counsel questions. So I'll do the preliminary search. I'll gather all of the, you know, marks that I feel might be problematic. I'll narrow it down to the 2 and 3 that I think, you know, I really want a substantive review on, and I'll just ask counsel about those. And I've noticed, you know, typical searches will be somewhere around like over $1,000, but when you narrowly scope it to just those particular marks that you have concerns about, it could go down to as much as like $400-600, which is a significant savings. And then lastly, you know, I also have the conversation with business about, you know, adjusting appetite for risk. If you're going to be cost conscious and if you want to avoid unnecessary costs, then you're going to have to adjust your appetite for risk for certain projects. That said, there's also a lot to be saved in a review of any outstanding apps, but on that, I will transition to Alistair, who has some really great insight.
Thank you. Thank you, Sophia. Yeah, I think you covered a lot of my own thoughts, and there's some very interesting points there. If you've got a situation where you're suddenly called to put a halt to the budget or put a substantial discount on it, you might want to have a look at your outstanding trademark applications. Now, some of these could have been going on for years, some of them could be quite new. One of the things to look at is obviously the dual application registration renewal fees situation, which happens in some countries, whereby you might be some way into the application stage and just needing to pay the registration fees at some stage in the near future. Can you let that go? Do you still need that country? That's the thought there. The second factor to look at when you're looking at your outstanding applications is, are they being opposed? If they are being opposed, how far down the line can you settle? can you get a good result out of this and clear the opposition out of the way, because obviously that's going to hold things up and cause money to be spent. Could go on for ages, basically. So a clear, prompt settlement, if possible, it would be the better outcome, in my opinion. The third factor Sophia looked at, are any of the marks facing difficult objections? Now, in a lot of cases, this should have been knocked out before the applications were actually filed by taking advice from local council as to whether or not there are any objections are likely. Now, this can backfire when you come across a fairly obscure objection, as I think we did recently, whereby we had a European trademark application, which turned out to mean something in one of the lesser known languages of the EU. Now, that was a particularly difficult objection, a very unexpected objection. And I think in those sort of circumstances, you're advising the client, save the money, do something else with that, don't advance any further. The fourth and final factor is really summing up all these issues and looking at what you can actually let go. Do you need to let go, have all these applications go through to registration, have all the oppositions go through to a decision, or can things be either withdrawn or terminated? I think that's some of the key points on that. If I could pass now to Michelle for the next issues. Oh, sorry, this is me again, isn't it? Not Michelle. To apologise. Right. Okay. The first point is looking when it comes to actually. It says renewal at the top there. This is very pertinent at the renewal stage. It's pertinent at almost any stage, particularly if you've got a situation whereby you're having to look at your budget, make cuts, and so on and so forth. What do you need to do? Why would you have a disorganised portfolio? Well, the simple point is the larger the portfolio, the more diverse it is, the chances are over time it will become more and more widespread and potentially disorganized, with variants on marks filed, variants on goods filed. You might have, for example, if you're a fashion company, you might have sunglasses covered in one territory, not in any other territory, down to sort of local requirements. That becomes increasingly, I think, difficult to actually control budget-wise and also legally as well. So looking at this opportunity, not only in terms of budget reduction, but a chance to actually cull the dead wood from the portfolio, is a very good time to do this and bring everything into line, as it were. And one of the best ways of doing that is by drawing up a list of working with your own brand managers, local people, do a list of marks which are potentially vulnerable to cancellation. That's particularly due to non-use. That's particularly useful in things like opposition actions and advising on that kind of strategy, because do you need to defend marks which are vulnerable to cancellation? Do you need to attack other people's mark when your mark itself is vulnerable to potentially vulnerable to non-use cancellation? So that's a good way of bringing everything into line at this stage. And I think I'm now past this slide now on to Michelle, if that's okay.
Of course, thank you, Alistair. So, in these uncertain times, and obviously we know everyone is facing or will be soon facing severe budget restraints, we're anticipating pressure, if you haven't already received it, to trim the trademark portfolios. But, the decision to drop a mark should not be taken as an afterthought. Building on what Alistair said about kind of culling the dead wood of a portfolio, to the extent possible, we recommend doing an audit on the portfolio to make thoughtful decisions about what your company's assets are. Think about the portfolio as a whole, which will allow you to make strategic, even though sometimes painful, decisions. So the first three questions, I have a list of these questions to ask when you're going to be considering whether to drop a mark. So the first three questions kind of go hand in hand. Where else do we have protection? What are the key markets for the product or service and business? And where do we have manufacturing? Typically when a new product is being launched and we're discussing filing opportunities with our clients, we will explore sort of a tiered filing approach as a pragmatic way to obtain optimum protection. This same approach can really be applied when considering where to maintain trademark registrations, especially during a time of crisis. So this tiered approach is going to look at a number in general and for that particular company. I'm sorry?
I'm sorry we lost you for a minute, but you're back.
Oh, okay, good. Sorry about that. So we're going to look at, when we're using the tiered approach, we're going to look at, as I say, the biggest markets in general and for that specific company or the products or services that the mark covers. It's really important to have discussions with relevant business units or marketing departments to ensure that you have the key markets where the protection should be maintained. And then, of course, keeping in mind the cost of maintenance, where there might be limited sales of products or services, then in those situations, it might make sense to drop the mark. Other considerations are going to be having protection where there's major manufacturing for a product, as well as some major counterfeiting and piracy havens that we can make sure that the company is set up for proper enforcement. And then finally, and probably less important during these times, we want to consider what the potential or growing markets are. If you already have protection in a country and you can justify maintaining it due to a growing market, it's going to be less expensive to keep that registration in place rather than starting fresh later. From a strategic standpoint, considering the portfolio as a whole, consider the portfolio as a whole and whether there's any duplicate protection in any given jurisdiction. So as Sophia mentioned earlier, the European Union versus specific countries. Also consider where additional filings are made as products expand. And if so, will maintaining one registration provide sufficient protection? So in other words, if you had initially filed one registration and that particular business unit product has taken off and you've since expanded those filings, now in this time of crisis, take a look and determine whether maybe we can call that and bring it back down to one registration. This will allow you to maintain your presence on the trademark registry, hopefully blocking third-party filings. And then later, as the situation changes and the economic situation improves, it's going to be easier to refile later for expanded offerings. And then, similarly, when you consider if there are cost savings available in maintaining only certain classes of goods or services rather than the entirety of the registration. So, this goes both for, single class registrations or multi-class registrations where the filing fees to renew might be, would increase because of the number of classes. Okay, and then also consider whether losing protection is going to impact your enforcement ability or impact or increase the risk of counterfeiting. Especially now having trademark registrations in place to enforce your brand is going to be vitally important. I'll cover this a little bit more later, but a registration is oftentimes useful and sometimes needed for brand enforcement on the internet. You have the ability to block and take down the sale of counterfeit products online in online marketplaces is only going to increase given these times of social distancing. We also know that there's been a surge of fraudulent activity, and with appropriate registrations in place, brand owners are going to be able to more efficiently pursue takedowns, UDRPs, uniform rapid suspension, and you know, the potential damage done to a brand without the proper protection in place can easily outweigh the costs saved through non-renewal. And then I think we're ahead of slide, but that's okay. This is something that Sophia also kind of mentioned, is can we rely on common law rights? So if you do have a registration in place, but it's in a jurisdiction where there are, you can rely on common law rights, you know, sometimes it might make sense if we're, you know, if this is truly a TRIA situation, then that would be the first registration that maybe we want to drop, understanding, of course, that there's going to be risks, that the rights that you obtain through common law use are not going to be as expansive as when you have a registration in place. And now we can go ahead to the next slide. So this is also something that Sophia mentioned earlier, so I'll go quick over this. Leveraging existing assets. Can we repurpose this brand for another business unit? This is really the time to get a little creative. You know, repurposing a brand or building upon an existing brand can save costs associated with the clearance, the filing, and it also mitigates the risk that a third party is going to object to that mark. So before dropping a brand wholesale, talk with marketing departments or other business units and key decision makers to determine whether you can take that brand or that mark and repurpose it for other products or services. You know, we're going to want to look here at the scope of coverage, making sure that the products, that the identification of goods or services align. You know, look at where the mark is currently registered. Do the markets for each of the products align, or do we need to do additional filings? And, you know, it also is going to save costs in building a new brand and benefiting from the existing goodwill, you know, especially where there might have been, you know, acquired distinctiveness for an otherwise descriptive mark. We don't want to have to start from scratch. And then finally, think about, is there third-party interest in the brand? Are there licensing opportunities? Can we make this asset work for us? Can this be a additional revenue stream rather than a cost for the company? So, you know, can we license the brand for merchandising? Are there endorsement or sponsorship opportunities? Are there co-branding opportunities available? Possibly a little more difficult, but still feasible would be, you know, are there third parties that might be interested in an assignment of the mark? Can we sell this brand? And then also, you know, can we use a brand or this registration as a security interest? So in these times, in order to maintain the portfolio as much as possible, you know, a little creative thinking can sometimes go a long way. And with that, I'm going to hand it back to Sophia.
Thanks, Michelle. That was really great. So with tips on, you know, on lowering portfolio costs, but focusing on renewal, one of the things that I always tell business first and foremost, because, you know, they're on the fiscal year mindset. I mean, a lot of them don't know that when you reach out to them and say, oh, we need this mark renewed or this mark is up for renewal, they don't realize it's for a 10-year term, sometimes 14-year term. So I always say this up front, even when I ask, like, hey, this mark is up for renewal for an additional 10-year term, let me know if you want me to renew. That really puts it into perspective for them. So they don't think it's, you know, thousands of dollars just for this 1 year and a recurring annual cost. Another thing that we also look at is, you know, how probable is it that we're going to use, reuse, throwback when it comes to vintage looks? When you have a historical brand that's been around for a long time, you know, it's gone through rebrands, it's gone through new designs, and then there've been various, you know, throwbacks. And maybe there's some logos that are more throwbackable than others. So especially with brands that are, you know, have been around for a really long time and they have 3, 4, 5 different, you know, looks, quote unquote, we'll sit down and really talk about, like, okay, which one do you really think you know, you foresee reusing, whether it be on merch or, you know, has potential on expanding, like Michelle mentioned, versus ones that you just know that, you know, it's really not worth it. Or maybe we don't have as much coverage for this one, so maybe keep the one that's around, keep around the one that you have the most amount of coverage for, you know, covering the most amount of territories, or perhaps maybe the most expansive of classes. And if not, then, it's a good candidate to maybe drop. The other thing we do that, I think about when renewing is considering material versus immaterial territories and marks. Marks have a history. There could have been 20 years ago some sort of push into Africa, and you have all of these African marks, and today you have no presence, and you haven't really had a strong presence, and you don't foresee a presence. Is it really worth it? Maybe pick a couple of key territories that you think that you might enter and drop the ones that you won't. And with regards to material versus material marks, if you have the word and a bunch of logos, do you maybe have one that's a word and logo together? Try to renew those marks where you basically get the most bang for your buck. If I have 2 logos and a word mark in one territory, all of which need to be renewed, can I consolidate? Does one maybe have the most amount of coverage for classes versus another? So that's definitely an exercise that we go through. And as I've mentioned and others have mentioned, when it comes to renewal, consolidating via community marks, even international registrations, try to cut out redundant coverage, and not just redundant, but also outdated registrations and classes. Within our industry, before it used to be 8 tracks, then it was vinyl, 8 tracks, then it was cassettes and tapes, it was CDs, and now it's all streaming, and that's affected our class coverage. So there can be really, really old registrations that I love the use date, but coverage is just no longer applicable. So really, what are we saving here? If I have maybe a later use date, but still a pretty strong, 20 years versus 40 years, do I really need to keep this? And then lastly, one way to manage costs when it comes to renewal is to really use the grace period to your advantage. I mean, there's positives and negatives, which we'll discuss later, but there definitely are, depending on when does your fiscal year end? When does your budget end? Is it a 6-month grace period? Is it a 1-year grace period? Are there additional costs to waiting it out that long, or not? So definitely ways to save on the renewal. And then on the enforcement front, Sharon, I think we're on to the next slide. Hello. Yep. Oh, here we go. Okay, there we go. So when it comes to cost savings, just being cost conscious on the enforcement front, I really take a business-minded approach when advising the business team. And I've noticed that honestly, all they really care about, is like, what are my chances of success as opposed to the cost? And really, does this impact my business? Some people are like, oh my God, someone's using my brand, it's really close, go after them, without really thinking it through. We've had plenty of instances where on the surface there could be a third-party application that seems really close and it covers our services, but then when we start digging deeper, it's, well, do we have a registration there specifically? Maybe the registration that we have is for an outdated design. Is this a litigious company? Are they really big, or is this kind of somebody new that just started out? To what extent are they using it? So really, it's a matter of, does this impact, does whatever this, infringement is, whether it be domain name or trademark or third-party filing, does it impact the business, or is this really a nice to have that, you want to enforce on the principle, but really there's not that much of an impact on the business? I always tell them kind of like, what do we have to gain versus what do we have to lose? If we go after them, am I going to be risking a potential cancellation of my own asset? Or, is this an opportunity that maybe we kind of give them a little leeway in this territory, guaranteeing us, potential future leeway in whatever other territory that they may have filed, that they may have superior rights in. So that's one, consideration that that I have when I have talks with business on enforcing just generally. Another cost savings that I've really implemented and is a little trick of the trade in the US. I'm not sure to what extent there's something like this in other jurisdictions, but to the extent that there is, I really love using letters of protest instead of waiting on having to file a notice of opposition. So we have watch services for our material marks, and there's some territories, I believe US and EU included, that watch applications that haven't been published yet. So it's pretty much, applied for as opposed to published. And I get the heads up. So if I see a mark that's currently, that's recently been applied for, the examiner hasn't even gone through the examination yet, and I think it might be, potentially problematic, or I really don't want to see it go through, I'll file a letter of protest letting the examiner know, hey, FYI, I prefer that you reject this application. And it saved me the entire cost of having to engage counsel, and file a notice of opposition, etc. And in line with that, we really tried to get ahead of the opposition deadline. As soon as I see something that might be not problematic on an infringement front, but more on the register front, a lot of the times, especially in the EU versus like the US, the EU has very broad goods and services descriptions. It's like everything in the kitchen sink. So there'll be a lot of times where there'll be third parties that are in a different industry that really there isn't a particularly high likelihood of confusion, but their coverage on the register is so broad that it really does touch upon our registrations. And then if we let it be, then it's kind of diluting the register. So we try to get ahead of that and reach out and just, propose that maybe they take certain descriptions out, or maybe keep it, but just exclusive of whatever, our industry is. That really saves on the cost of having to file an opposition or anything, anything more contentious. And on that, I'll transition over to Alistair for additional considerations and enforcement tips.
Thank you, Sophia. That's very interesting, actually. You've covered, I think, the majority, if not all, of the main points. So I'll reiterate some external counsel, because it'd be a lot easier to deal with you than some other clients who, if I come down to the first point I made there, confine the offensive action to core brands and territories only. It's that question, why are you opposing? Because they've got the same mark in one of our territories. Kind of, yeah, but they're in a completely different business. It doesn't matter, they've got our mark. This is an actual conversation I had about 2 weeks ago. They're not a threat to you. So the first thing is it a business threat? It's quite simple. Does it impact the brand? Ask the question if it's not already been answered by the client, and hopefully, if you can get a direct answer back on that, you can then go on to say, look, go ahead, or we do this, or we don't advise you go ahead. Now, again, that one of not advising to go ahead on an action I had with a music industry client about 2 weeks ago, who it was the same argument. They've got our trademark, yeah, but they're in a completely different area. They've been going for 15 years. We might want to go into the area. You won't. It's as simple as that. So after about 5 or 6 emails back and forth, he decides not to do anything more about it, which is kind of good. But if you take a very reactive way of acting, you just file the opposition, there must surely come a stage when either you or the client asks, why did we do this? 6 months and many thousands of pounds of dollars later. So that's the first point to make. Coming down to the second point, again, contentious actions such as an opposition action or invalidation is taking place. How far down do you want to go with this? Are you defending or are you attacking? Can you settle a matter honourably in a good way? If so, and that will avoid the action dragging on for years, possibly going into litigation, costing a fortune. For what purpose, basically? Keep asking the question. Your counsel should be asking you, why are you doing this? We can do this, we could do that. you can settle. Expect if you're not as the client, if you're not taking the lead on this yourself, get your external counsel into a situation where they should be telling you, coming back and forth to you with possible solutions to this. Don't allow, wherever possible, don't allow opposition actions, other contentious actions drag on, and certainly wherever you can avoid litigation. It's a waste of money, believe you me, 90% of cases. Coming down to the final point, determine clear objectives at the outset. Why are you doing this? Why are you defending this? Why are you attacking this? What is the business threat? What do you hope to get out of this? Is it what you might call classic defend the fort situation, whereby, I think as Sophia said, the very broad specifications, someone's say you're on the computer software field in a particular area, another client's got the same or similar mark for computer software, but actually they're in a different area. Can you get them to just limit their use, limit their application down? If so, you've determined that right from the word go. What you don't want in a situation like that is just to file the action, carry on 3 or 4 years later, money's been thrown at it, time has been thrown at it, and you're not really going anywhere. You could have had this resolved probably in the first month, 2 months, so at a minimum of time and expense. So I think that's probably the most important point: is what do you want to do? What does the client want to do? What can they do? What should they do? How long is it going to take? How much is it going to cost? What are you going to get out of it? So I think that's summed up those. It's a very complex subject, but very simply looking at some of the kind of very, very basic issues from the outset is the way I would probably look at this. I think I've probably covered enough on that. Sharon, are you the next one down?
Yeah, so another easy way to manage costs to protect your brand is to utilize automated technology to handle your risk. So we have a very sophisticated online brand management portal that allows you to manage your online brand protection in one place. We work with you to determine the aspects of the program, what will be addressed, what will not, and created automated processes to enforce. So it's automatically set up to send cease and desist or UDPR and other more aggressive tactics. And this is all managed from one portal. So this is kind of an easy way to gain some efficiencies. So you can get easy reporting and tracking, and this can be a huge savings rather than managing with various law firms across the globe with different strategies, and managing invoicing is really straightforward. And so with that, I'm going to hand it over to Alistair to really talk about counsel management.
All right, this is really looking at ways of helping external clients to consolidate and manage their budgets. I think to date we've looked at tips for firms to look at cutting their budgets down by exercising controls over filing and renewals and so on and so forth. These are a couple of ways that external counsel could possibly assist their clients, playing very much a longer term look at things rather than a short fix to try and work with the client, get them to spend their money wisely. Look at perhaps reducing their own costs down as a temporary fix to help the client through a particularly difficult time. Now, one of those areas people could look at is asking the external counsel to look at their own hourly rates over the course of, say, the next 12, 14 months or so, particularly if they're on an engaged contractual rate with them. Would they be prepared to lower their expenditure, their hourly rates by perhaps a fixed percentage to help the client over this difficult period? Another factor to take into account is obviously to apply the same idea of cost or fee reduction to all key external counsel throughout the globe. So you could say, for example, if you're doing a lot of work in China with your Chinese associates, either if you're going directly to them or going through a coordinating external counsel, can you get them to, perhaps on a temporary basis only, to reduce their hourly rates, their budget costs down to help us through this time? The third area is where you've got a situation whereby a firm is buying up other firms' IP portfolios. Now, I came across this recently, where IP rights are being acquired from various sources, and the incumbent firms are coming with the IP portfolio to work with the client. Now, that when you're working with 2, 3, 4 different law firms on fairly large portfolios, the cost is likely to be pretty high, and you don't really get that degree of coordination either on the extent and breadth of the portfolio or the costs themselves. So a factor to take into account there is wherever possible, try and consolidate those that diverse portfolio down to one firm and negotiate with them to get a consolidated and reduced rate for managing the entire portfolio as a whole. I think those points are now covered. Sophia, can I hand over to you?
Thank you. And actually, on that last point, I too had a story. I highly recommend reviewing your firm's billing practices and how they bill you, especially if you're dependent on one firm and you don't have as much experience and a breadth of the variety of billing structures that certain firms have. For example, when I came into Warner, they used a particular firm for a filing program, and I noticed that the bills are just astronomical. And I looked into the billing, and they were charging. So the way that they set up their matters was, it'd be one application. It would be a mark in a territory that didn't have multi-class applications. So, if we were applying for 5 classes, then there would be 5 applications in X country. But it was one POA that covered all 5 applications. It was one, there was a lot of stuff that was redundant, but they would do 0.2 for preparing a POA and then charge that 0.2 across 5 matters. So I have a POA that took like 12 minutes to do that is now being charged up to an hour. So definitely review your firm's billing practices and try to consolidate and push back on especially redundant practices. And in line with low-hanging cost-cutting fruit, some of the things that we implement, what I mentioned earlier, the preliminary search is really narrowing down the scope of outside counsel advice. I don't need them to go and, tell me about the 5 potential marks and why they're more than likely low risk. I'd rather focus on the 2 that I'm kind of like 50-50 on and really just want their take on it. The other thing too is really find counsel that gets you and your business. It really saves on costs, especially if you're in a niche market. So I came over from CPG to the music industry, and they're 2 completely different animals. So the scope of advice on something as niche as an artist name search, it's really particular because there's a lot of considerations that I didn't even take into account from a CPG perspective. So finding counsel that gives you advice that's practical to your industry really also saves on costs. So you go through trial and error, but once you do find that golden nugget, hold on to it. The other thing too is really stay on top of trademark office fees. I got a notice from a firm that we don't even use that the UAE again reduced their official fees, but the UAE, I think majority of counsel charges publication and registration fees up front when you with the application. So I reached out. I was like, hey, I got a note that, you know, the publication registration fees have lowered. We haven't even gotten to them. And they addressed it. They said, yes, we've already like taken that into account. Once the applications go through, blah, 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 we'll give you the credit. So work with your counsel on that. I know that there's some counsel that actually doesn't charge the publication and registration fees up front. So if you can find that and have that cost savings on the front end without having to actually, you know, keep on top of it on the back end. Another low-hanging fruit is with regards to trademark use. I always encourage trying to use the logo and the word mark together where possible. Get creative, especially where, you know, on low impact use. For us, I've noticed, you know, the particular record labels, they control, it's very easy, you know, they control the newsletters. So I could get a lot of use and a lot of specimens, etc., from simple things like newsletters, as opposed to having them put up an entirely new website. So you can definitely get creative there, low-hanging fruit of coverage and use with instances, you know, that don't require a huge corporate resource. And then use external resources to the fullest. If you don't have a big trademark department, like I don't, I've never worked in a large trademark office. It's really been, you know, one attorney, maybe a paralegal. So your internal docketing system is huge, but it's also a huge time suck. So when I came into Warner and I implemented Alt Legal, that particular system actually allows your counsel to update the docket directly, your docket directly. So, you know, if you don't have a paralegal or if it's a huge time suck, use that. Another thing is, if you don't have an internal docketing system, you know, not all businesses do, use your outside counsel's online docketing system. You could run reports if you need to. You know, you don't have to email a paralegal or the attorney with questions that could be easily answered if you just use their online docket instead. Also, with regards to firm resources, our Chinese counsel that actually, fun note, introduced me to Michelle. We use the same counsel in China, Kongshen, and they have a platform where you can request renewals and new applications, assignments, etc., at a much lower cost, depending on what the filing is. If I do it via the platform, as opposed to just via email to counsel, I could have anywhere from 30 to 70% savings, which is huge, especially when it comes to, like, an assignment is an assignment. You don't really need expertise on that. And then lastly, you know, watch services. I feel like it allows you to get ahead and in front of a lot of issues. You know, we have Trademark Clearinghouse watches on the material marks, and that'll give me the heads up. We have trademark watches. I brought those in-house at some point. If your trademark watches are through outside counsel, you know, some of them offer complimentary, and that's great, utilize that. But if some of them, you know, charge you a monthly fee that could be equal to an annual fee, you know, look into consolidating and to cost cutting on that end as well. And on that point, I am going to transition to Toon on abandonment strategy.
Yes, hi everybody. I heard a lot of interesting things, a lot of legal knowledge on what to do, and also the bridge Sophia just made also in how we are going to do it. And I want to go a little bit deeper on that part. How are we going to do it, and how can we also use technology into that? So that's well. I like to use the rhythm of first getting organized, then as a in-between step, budgeting. That's also very important. What are the budgets? What is possible, and how can we get insight into those? Also, then we have the risk assessment. So, and that leads eventually to making decisions. But that should all be supported. And one thing to get organized in the first place. That's the step one. Is how do we manage our data? Is it all available? Can we? What are we looking? Do we have too much data, or do we have the right data? Are the right people able to look at the right data? It's all in that. Is the knowledge there? So there need to be data from the trademark portfolio point of view, but obviously also from the users. Are the right persons involved? Is the right business information available? The revenue per country, for example. Do we know how the product fits into the total product strategy? Are the people who knows that, are they looking at the right data? And that's the and that has to fit into a budget. It's a next year budget, but also a 5 or 10 year budget. And then, well, if you want to, are you into valuation of brands and trademarks? That's also very important. So the product revenue will there be also a thing. So that's all information we have to put together and get organized and make it available to the right persons. So that's, I think, very important step for this. So, and I will also shows some slides on how we look at it. And it are slides from our EasyIP platform. This is how we communicate with our customers. That can be through interfacing, but also on more simple ways, XML or Excel. And it's online, it's a web-based platform. But most the things it can do is that you can audit the data in there. And if you have that all right, then you can also start with your budgeting, because if you have all the trademarks, it's available. If you have, if you know what it costs, and you can see there are multiple suppliers in the market, and you can get quotes from them. So if you do everything in-house, there's probably a saving possibility also there. And that will be now, but it will also be in for the next period, 5 or 10 years. Then you have in this crisis period also, how do you handle your budget? Are you spending it in 2020, or will you push it away to 2021? There was this example for using the grace period, for example. So you can, if you want to postpone it, it's possible. But if you want to get it done straight away, that's also possible. So, and I think that's also very important in cutting the cost of your trademark portfolio and managing precisely how you want it to be. So that's the as we see it, as it is now on the screen, is that well, we can you would like to have a total list. You want to have the status of the data, and you want to have the prices all included in there. So this is an export from EasyIP. But if we go, and this is actually then you have to think. You have to bring in the things we discussed at the beginning of this webinar. It's about risk, and how can we apply this to the list and to our trademark portfolio. And I think we discussed that part, and we have to communicate effectively. So that's also about data and who is looking at the data, and how can we take the decisions in this. So that's
so I think that's a really, we kind of went through it pretty quickly, but
yeah.
I think basically the 4 steps in the process, the getting organized, gathering what data to pull, what information to pull for budgeting and to get multiple quotes, to set the budget, to see what are some options, and then that risk assessment. So by taking a certain decision, we're going to talk about it more later, but make sure that the risk assessment is there and communicate effectively, and then really bringing the team together, decide what facts to consider, be objective, Be prepared to make recommendations. Don't just talk about the risk and offer no recommendations. They're really going to be looking for strong business partners. And we are getting towards the end, but I wanted to cover the technology. So Tone, can you go over that?
Yeah, I will take you quickly through it. So I mentioned already our EasyIP platform. So that includes, it's a web-based platform. So it can distribute easily the information throughout the world and to every person. The fees are included. You have an overview of it. And it can connect to your IPMS system if you have an own system, and also to the docketing system. So that will not only lower the cost of the renewal itself, but also on your side of the or in your organization to optimize the docketing and the formalities activities in your department. So, and then it comes with a lot of information. I think that's very important to look at the right stuff. So deadline management, we can customize interfaces. So a lot of companies want to have a report but tweaked as the standard. So that's that can also be done in this platform. So, and if you can go to the next slides, the overview are there, and you see also links to the docketing system. So from the overview, you can go to the to your documents. You want to see the correspondence to the agents or to your POAs who are behind these trademarks. So it's all there. Some nice shots. It's about the world, your coverage. This will do splendidly in boardrooms if you can display your trademark portfolio coverage all around the world. But for cost cutting, it's also very important to give the good renewal instructions, and we can facilitate it very easy by a yes and no decision on this screen, but also on the top line you can see the budget implication of the decisions. So the total price, but the yes and the no price, it's also there. So, and that can be sliced and diced. So if a portfolio manager can only see his part, then it will adjust that part also. So that's very powerful. And all click-throughs for details, case summaries, and also the deadlines are obviously also available in this web-based platform. Most people do not only want to stick to the platform, want also to have an export. So there are also export facilities in here. This is the Excel for the for own use, and it's slightly different than what I mentioned before, the interfacing between your system, the data uploading, but also data downloading to your system. So that's all will also be available. And if you are in the EasyIP platform, there are also, and if you're connected to our watching services, then there will be the results of those watching services can also be displayed in this platform, and you can also give the go to give an action yes or no, or we want to get more information. That's also possible. Okay, and then on this last slide, we show we call it the event report, but actually it shows you every move we make in the case. So if you do a renewal, you can see if it's filed or is it ready, is the certificate there, so you can follow everything in there. So what I discussed was that that technology, it supports the how we can organize this all. And it focuses on the getting organized, having a straight budget, do the right risk assessment. So, and that leads to making the right decisions. And well, we can support it by very efficient execution on price and time and communication wise.
Well, I'm sorry we had to race through. We've gotten definitely some very good questions. So was that you, Sophia? Did you want to say something?
Yeah, I just really I wanted to note that you know, the other flip side of using this type of fully supportive IP technology is on the resource end. You know, not every company has a bunch of trademark paralegals and legal assistants and attorneys and et cetera. So the more you can do and offload on these types of resources, the more time you have to do those things that you just can't offload on outside counsel. So even if, you know, I don't think the cost would be more, but even if it's cost neutral, just the resource savings with these types of technologies is, in my opinion, astronomical. It makes my life 10 times easier. And it allows me to focus on the other things and really, you know, use time effectively and resources and you know, and heads effectively.
So I think we're not going to be able to go over our risks just because we are at the end of our time here. You know, we really covered so many ideas to cut costs. You know, I read somewhere that we're all in the storm together, but we're in different boats. You know, some companies are experiencing real hardships and are asked to cut the budget by 60% or more. So our boats are experiencing rough waters. You know, you're looking to make cuts across the spectrum: consolidation, renewal quotes, technology improvements, enforcement efficiencies, all the ideas and tips that the group here has provided. Others might be looking at minimal cuts. So your boats, you know, might find an easy path through the storm. So no matter what, hopefully you've got some excellent tips to get you started. Now I'd like to go on to questions, and bear with us. We're going to go a little bit over, but I'm going to start with Sophia. It says here, what are the risks of letting marks go into grace with the intention to pay later?
So I think there's the straightforward, obviously, costs. Not all territories allow you to go into grace without a fee. So there's definitely the cost perspective, but I think it's more logistics. You know, a lot of these types of territories, you need to legalize the POA. Well, right now, like especially with us, legalization is not as easy as it usually is, with a lot of offices closed, or you can't even UPS, like, you know, with signatories home, they don't have the UPS or carrier, whatever capabilities. So on the one end, it's pushing it out, but be really, really mindful of those due dates. Is it 6 months? Is it 1 month? Is it a territory where it's going to take me 2 months to get a legalized POA back? Are they, you know, easing those types of requirements or not? So there's definitely advantages, but I feel like you have to be very strategic. And there's also the risk of, you know, who's going to stay on top of it? With a lot of companies cutting staff, if you had an employee staying on top of the grace period, if you don't have an internal docketing system and they're let go before the grace period is up, but before you did anything, like there's a lot of potential for things to fall through the cracks. So if you are going to go that route, you know, really lean on your outside counsel to keep on top of you and to kind of remind you periodically to make sure that you don't miss it on just like the logistical front of couriering a legalized POA to them in time.
Great, thank you. Great answer. We'll take one more question. This is for Tone. What is the cost of EasyIP?
Okay, well, basically EasyIP is included in our renewal services. So if you take advantage of the benefits in here and do the renewals with us, then all the other benefits, so the side effects of the other features of EasyIP, they will all be available to you. So and that, well, there is threshold for the renewal services, obviously, but that's pretty low. So that's I think it's it's very good, and we can do that because it's a proprietary system. So we also can make some small adjustments in reporting or stuff like that, and we can fix the interfaces. That will take some time for an external party, but as soon as if it's there, then it runs and it can keep going. So there are all benefits, and it's so in the end of the day, it's a very low-cost solution towards your renewals and also the recorder part.
Well, thank you very much. First of all, I'd like to thank Alistair, Sophia, Michelle, and Tone for sharing their time and expertise. And I would like to thank the attendees for your questions and attention, and my apologies for us going over a little bit. And as mentioned, we'll send answers to those questions that we did not get answered on the call today. And we'll send links to the articles and the PowerPoints so that you can have that for later to take a look at. So thank you again.
Thank you. Have a good one, everyone.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you all.
Bye.